Darius Oliver, and you're listening to 92.1 KXVS, the voice of Stockton.
This broadcast will start in 60 seconds. This broadcast will start in 45 seconds. This broadcast will start in 30 seconds. This broadcast will start in 15 seconds. This broadcast will start in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The Voice of Stockton. For more information on The Voice of Stockton, go to thevoiceofstockton.org.
The views and opinions expressed in the following program do not necessarily reflect those of KXVS The Voice of Stockton or its parents, affiliates, management, and staff.
It's time for Stockton Alive, and well, here's the host. The person the Raiders couldn't get to replace Greg Papa, so they went with Brent Musburger. Nate Knott. Nate, take it away.
Hey, Stockton Alive. That's one of the things we are going to talk about, is how alive Stockton is with the party scene on some weekends, which I got to enjoy myself this weekend. However, we should mention the 800-pound gorilla event first. What happened, were you there, by the way?
Where?
At the big event, Stockton Con?
Actually, I was not.
Have you been to a Stockton Con?
I have been, but...
I thought you had. I have not been to
sometimes one. Crowds aren't I'm not a big fan of big crowds.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of big crowds when they're seated at a stadium or something, but to be mingling among a huge number of people, I'm not necessarily comfortable with. Now, I think that's a great event. I love it. I think it's spectacular. But it's not exactly my kind of event. Mm-hmm. I'm not really a dress-up person. I'm not
really a cosplayer?
What's that?
They call it cosplay, dressing up.
Oh, yeah. And I'm not really like a, how do I put this? I mean no disrespect whatsoever in saying this. I'm not really a fantasy space agey type guy.
Yeah.
I did really like the very first Star Wars movie. I did not like the ones after that. I did, like most people, come to love the television show Star Trek. Mm-hmm. For the record, that became a retro hit show while I was in college. Now, got to give you some relevance on when that was.
Go Chico State.
Yes, that's right. Go Wildcats. The cat is back. Star Trek aired in the seasons of 67, 68, and 69.
William Shatner, right?
Yes. And Leonard Nimoy, of course. And
George Takei.
Yes. And then the beautiful black lady was Uhura, who was asked to stay on the show by Martin Luther King, no less. Because she was going to leave. She's afraid she was getting typecast. Mm-hmm. She was going to leave. They said, no, you can't leave. You're like one of the first really big African-American women stars ever on network television. So anyway, getting back to that, though. So I was at Chico State from 75 to 80. And somewhere around 76, 77 is when the Star Trek thing really took off, where people had rediscovered the show and it was a big deal.
Nicolette Nichols? Yeah, that's her. Yeah,
yeah. That doesn't sound exactly right, but that's.
No, excuse me, Nichelle Nichols.
Yeah, Nichelle. Yeah, there you go. Nichelle
My bad.
Nichols. That's it. That's exactly right.
I read that real quick for a second, but yeah.
And she did have a kiss with William Shatner. It was the first considered the first network television interracial kiss, and that was a big deal at one time. So anyway, yeah. So Star Trek was a groundbreaking series that we now know that a lot of the devices they used on that show, in some form or fashion, have come along, like flip cell phones originally were a lot like the communicator.
Not like the brick cell phones in the 80s?
Yeah. And everything except the beaming up and down of the ship.
Scotty.
Pretty much happened, yeah. By the way, they never did say beam me up, Scotty. It's never once ever said on the show.
James Doohan?
Yeah, James Doohan, that's right. Who also was the opposite. Now, in the show, he was supposed to be Scottish?
Yeah.
But in real life, he was Irish or something. I forget, there was some difference. But he was, he was convincing. So anyway, So Stockton Con drew a huge crowd. They apparently had a wonderful event where they got some young guy who was in a wheelchair and gave him some kind of special costume.
Which was awesome, yeah.
Yeah, made a big deal out of it. And that's thrilling. I'm so glad that happened. It draws huge events. We should mention Mike Millerick of the University of Pacific.
Formerly of the
formerly, that's right. In marketing and
sports information.
Yes, and then he actually helped create this.
Yeah, with the United Way.
Right, and
Andy
then he
Program.
got ill, and he kept this quiet for a long time, but he got very ill with heart disease, but now he's already had surgery, he's back alive, really alive and energetic and out there.
And they're actually next year they're moving it up earlier in the calendar. It's going to be August 3rd and 4th.
Oh, okay. And then the other thing is, I believe he's already like franchised it, licensed it out to other cities in the valley, and he now works that almost all year round, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, the point is there was that big event, and then of course we won't get into a big sports tangent, but the Ports. Now, their record is not so great.
I thought you were going to at least talk about how I said you turned down the job for the Raiders.
Oh, yes.
Gave it to Brent Musburger over there.
That was real nice of you to say that, but of course it's not true.
I know, right? Yeah.
What is true, though? I will tell you a true story about me covering a Raiders game, though.
Oh, you did?
As a media person, yes.
Yeah.
I did, in fact, go to a Monday Night Football Raiders game in 1979.
So on the call was Howard Cosell?
Yep. Yeah. It was at the Oakland Coliseum.
Oakland County.
Oakland Alameda County Coliseum. Kind of a clunky name. Right? That's what they used to call it. And it was a Monday night game. ABC Television's there. Went back when it was a big deal on ABC.
I know. I used to remember
before it became kind of a third-rate thing, as it is now on ESPN.
I used to love when it was on ABC on network.
Right.
Monday nights, just tune in at 5.
They're playing the Denver Broncos, who then had Lyle Alzado and Craig Morton.
What do they call those uniforms again? Like the powder orange or
they
something?
Still had the old orange
or the
ones,
crush,
yeah.
orange
Before
crush?
They went to the cherry reddish thing, they had the more
orange
crush thing, yeah. And this is at the height of the Denver Broncos Oakland Raiders rivalry. Of course, sold out Coliseum.
Was Dan Reeves the coach back then? Or no?
No. This is when Red Miller's still the coach.
Okay, for
He's
the Broncos.
The one that kind of brought him to prominence.
Yeah.
And this is just a year and a half removed from them being in the Super Bowl.
1979, right?
Yep.
Okay.
And they're playing for first place. And so it's the height of the whole thing. The Raiders jump out, and the Raiders had John Matuzak at that time, by the way. And so Kenny Saber's still the quarterback for the Raiders. And they jump out 6-0 either in the first quarter or early second quarter. And then the Broncos clamped down and eventually won the dugout, a ground out like a 20-6 win. Here's the reason I was there. Well, this is what I was actually, a sports producer at KHSL TV and radio in Chico. And I was covering him because there was a Chico State player on the Denver Broncos. His name was Chris Payne. I'm surprised I still remember that.
Tom Jackson was on that defense.
Yes, he was. He was one of the big players for the Broncos at that time. Defensive end or lineman, I want to say, or linebacker?
Yeah, linebacker.
Linebacker, yes. So Chris Payne is there, and he's what he was he was a special teams player.
George Atkinson was on that team too.
Right.
Yeah.
And this is the Raiders team with all the big names of the 70s.
No, I think was he.
Although this is the Raiders kind of fading away at this. It was that very next season when they announced they were moving.
I have it right here in front of me. That score, that game.
Yeah.
No, actually, that was the Mile High game. Hold on.
No. This was in Oakland. Yeah.
Yeah, September.
Yeah. And here's the reason I mention this, though. At this time, I'm a very young, up-and-coming sportscaster, and this is going to be my new life. It's going to Major League Football games on Monday night television and everything. I did, in fact, conduct live interviews in the Oakland Coliseum locker room after the game, and the Denver Broncos, because I was actually there to cover Chris Payne, special teams player for the Broncos. He did make a couple tackles, I think, on kickoffs or punt returns that night. But anyway, here's the irony of the whole thing. I'm getting my big moment here at the Oakland Coliseum. By the way, the crew included, you mentioned Howard Cosell. Yes, it did. And that was when the great New York Giants guy, Gifford, was the play-by-play announcer. I trying to remember at that point in '79 who the color announcer.
Dandy Don there?
What was that?
Dandy Don Meredith?
No, Meredith is gone by '79.
Okay, let me look this up.
No, this is when they had this. They might have had an offensive or defensive lineman at that time. I think a former St. Louis Cardinal lineman. I can't think.
Was it Dan Dierdorf?
Yeah, I think Dan Dierdorf might have been the guy that was either he or another defensive lineman whose name I can't think of right now. Might have been the guy that was there at that time. But they had the pregame. When you go into a big sporting event, they usually have a pregame meal or press room with food in it. So I ate the food, and I don't know what it was I ate, but I came, during the game, I came down with food poisoning. I mean big time food poisoning. From about halftime on of that game, I was just immensely sick with stomach ache and pain. And the worst part of course, I had the other part of your stomach illness too. Through sheer determination and willpower, I held everything together. I went down and conducted all the locker room interviews.
I think it was Fran Tarkenton.
No.
Okay.
Well, it could have been.
Okay,
It could have been
sorry.
Fran Tarkenton.
Yeah.
That's possible. Yeah, that's possible.
Okay, but go ahead. You were
And
sick.
Don Klein, by the way, was the CBS radio announcer. The same Don Klein who later did the 49ers on KCBS.
Yeah.
And was the Stanford announcer forever and ever. So, and by the way, Frank Gifford in real life had these really thick glasses on before he went on the air. Almost bottle thick. I couldn't believe it. But anyway, as I'm in the Denver Broncos locker room towards the end of the game, and I'm leaning over interviewing people, I thought I was going to lose my dinner on top of a couple of these guys like Lyle Zane. I thought, oh my God, I'm going to do this in the Denver Broncos locker room. They're going to pick me up and tear me to shreds and throw me out the door. But I managed to hang on to everything until I got home later that night, which was a long drive, by the way. And the moment I got home,
Had to go back to Chico?
actually, because I was so sick, I went back to Manteca, my hometown.
Wow.
I diverted to Manteca instead of going back to Chico, because Manteca is only a little over an hour away versus Chico being almost 3 hours away. But it was a fun event. It was a fun game, but I was just immensely sick. So that wasn't part of the script, folks. And
That wasn't.
we devolved into sports again and broadcasting.
Talking
But
about
we're broadcasters. and we're
but
broadcasting.
you were covering a couple legendary partiers.
Well, it was
Talking about
actually
parties.
that game was a big deal, and that was the turning point of the season. By the way,
The Raiders won
Broncos-
that game, by the way.
No. Raiders did not win the game I was at. The Broncos won 20-6. The Raiders led 6-0, and then the Broncos came back to win. And it was the turning point of the season. The Broncos went on to win the Western Division of the AFC West or whatever the AFC Conference, and that was kind of the end of that Broncos team too. Though Craig Morton was getting old, Red Miller was a year or two away from retiring from that. Both teams were actually in decline. We didn't know it at the time, but both teams were actually in decline. The Raiders next year, in 1980, announced they were moving to Los Angeles the following year, just like today's Raiders talking about going to Las Vegas. And in 1980, the Raiders, and this is under John Madden now, he was coaching. In 1980, the Raiders had 3 consecutive games where they got shut out. Now, they had already traded Stabler away to Houston or somebody by the 1980 season. So they were using a former quarterback from, I want to say BYU or something. I can't think of his name anymore. But anyway, so that night that was one of the most anticipated football games of the year that season. But, again, both teams were actually in decline, even though no one exactly knew it. So, I had my big moment there. I also covered a Giants game for the Manteca Bulletin in 1974 and saw a very young John the Count Montefusco pitch a complete game shutout over the Cincinnati Reds and hit a home run and do a bunch of other stuff in that game. And I even got to tape broadcast that in my tape recorder from a special box in the mezzanine level of Candlestick Park. Thanks to the goodness of Bill Thompson and Al Michaels, no less, allowed me to do that. And I was about 18 years old. That was September something, 1974. Okay, enough of that. So, I was going to mention the Stockton Ports, despite having lost, they won the first half and won pretty convincingly. Of course, in the minor league baseball, when you win the first half, they call up almost the entire team to Double-A or something. So, with the current team they have, which is almost an entire new roster, they are in first place, but with a sub-500 record at 26-30. But still, they're hanging in there. Of course, they've already qualified for the playoffs because they won the first half. And they, in fact, will play 2 playoff games in Stockton, September 5th and 6th, I believe it is. I think that's a Wednesday and a Thursday, if I remember right.
I believe
think Monday,
so.
Labor Day is September 3rd.
It is.
Okay. So enough. We won't do any more sports, basically, unless it just somehow comes up again. But so we want to talk about partying a little bit here. Oh, and the Stockton Kings did announce a new coach, but I don't have any of that information.
His name's Tyrone Ellis.
That's right.
Former
And I do remember
Phoenix
that name.
Suns assistant.
Yeah, but we're not going to go into that. We'll save that for another night. So what I wanted to mention, of course, my lovely Peruvian beauty had her 60th birthday party.
Happy birthday, Becky. From,
That's right here. And
KXVS.
she's broadcast. She's been a guest on this show. And was a guest
Dr.
last-
on Julie Dameron Brown
Yes,
show.
with downtown Julie Dameron Brown. That's right. And Dr. Julie Dameron Brown being a veterinarian. And a very generous veterinarian. And she does...
a great person, too.
Yeah, and she does a lot of free pro bono stuff for animals and shelters and things. And she did run for county supervisor and got a pretty respectable vote for somebody that's relatively new to the area and never run for office before, against a very popular incumbent, we might add, Chuck Wynn.
And she does a lot with the community, the Lions Club,
she's everywhere.
Rotary clubs, the food bank, yeah.
Right. So, just wanted to mention that we had a great time. This happened to be at the Ave right here on the Miracle Mile. And for those of you who don't know, our studios are on the beautiful Miracle Mile on Bedford Place.
A nice 3-minute walk at most from here to the studios. Okay,
to give you some relevance where we're located, we're right across the street essentially from Werlo's, the Tap Beer House or something like that. And there's a barbecue a couple doors down the street, but don't remember the name of it.
Fat City's Barbecue.
Who's that?
Fat City Barbecue.
Oh, yes, Fat City Barbecue. Good.
And right by the Art Lab.
Yes. And having said that, the reason I brought this up was not to be too greedy here and take up a lot of personal time for my own family or anything, but to mention we had a great party here on the Ave, on the Miracle Mile, which is located next to the Southern Exposure, the huge, beautiful beauty salon place, which was once Brown and May in Clothing, by the way. I'm sorry, Bravo McKeegan Clothing, men's clothing store. Anyway, I mentioned this because people always say, because this is the show Stockton Alive, and that's exactly what I'm going to talk about. People always say, there's nowhere to go, nothing to do in Stockton, we don't have anything here. First of all, in the last 10 years, we've gained most of the major chain restaurants that everybody else had, and in some cases, ones that others don't have. That used to be a complaint about Stockton. We don't have an Olive Garden. We don't have this. We don't have that. Well, we have all of that now. But here's what I want to tell everyone. I'm going to name off, and I know I'm leaving a couple out here, unfortunately, and I wish I could remember all of them. But I'm going to name off all the independently owned and operated restaurants in the Stockton area, and primarily most of these I'm naming are downtown Stockton, Miracle Mile. A couple are country clubs, some on Harding, a little bit north, some are a little bit north out on Pacific. But I'm going to mention all the independently owned non-chain restaurants. Nothing against chains, by the way, but I just want to point out that we got all these great places in Stockton that you could hold a legitimate birthday party or anniversary or quinceañera. Well, not all of them could do a quinceañera, but I mean, you could hold a really good party at most of these places, get a reasonable price, have the personal touch of someone who knows you. And I'm just going to start naming them off. Starting downtown, we've got Yasuyani, Greek-American restaurant on Main Street. We've got Masaki, which is the Japanese restaurant over at the by the Cineplex, and the Thai Palace is there also. We have Bella Vista in the Stockton Hotel. And at Bella Vista, you not only have a huge, beautiful restaurant located on the ground level, but you got that incredible terrace restaurant, lounge, patio area on above the 4th floor of the Hotel Stockton with an incredible view of West Stockton and the Port of Stockton. You've got some great Mexican restaurants downtown. You've got Mi Ranchita, which has a special banquet room. That's located a little bit south of downtown on Center Street, just on the other side of the railroad tracks. You've got Maria's. You've got Tio Pepe's. Both Maria's and Tio Pepe's have private banquet rooms. Tio Pepe's is located downtown at I want to say Channel Street and Hunter. I know it's on Hunter Street. And then Maria's is on Main Street. And you've got Cast Iron Trading Company. You've got Channel Brewing Company. You've got the Deliberation Room, which we've mentioned numerous times on this show. And I'm sure there's a couple more I'm missing, but those are the ones I can remember for sure. There's a couple newer restaurants that I haven't been to recently. There used to be a Chinese restaurant turned into a Mexican restaurant on El Dorado near the police department. By the way, there's a new restaurant downtown it's either now open or about to be open called Mimosas in a place that used to be known as the Brick House. If you went back to ancient history, that was once the Sam's Hofbrau. For anyone who doesn't remember, Sam's Hofbrau used to be a kind of a steam table, traditional pasta, meat, vegetables restaurant, similar to what Angelina's is like, only it was a chain. And it was actually owned by Denny's Restaurants, by the way. But it's supposed to be like a German brew house, cafeteria-style restaurant. Actually, Werlo's is very similar to the kind of place I'm talking about. You have the University Hotel and Plaza. Now, that's a big, fancy-looking place, but it's still independently owned and operated. It's not a chain. So then coming over here to the Miracle Mile, and help me, if I forget one, you throw it in there.
I will.
We've got Werlo's, we've got the Fat City Barbecue, we've got Valley Brew, We've got, let's see, the Korean barbecue, Midtown Creperie.
Yep.
And we've got the Whiskey Barrel. All of those places could hold a party for you. And all of them have food and drinks. And they're all reasonably priced. And they all have very good service. Now, if you get a little bit out of the actual area that we often talk about, which is downtown Miracle Mile, but if you go to Harding, you have the Duck Nook and you have Susie's. And I like both of those places. And I love it. And Duck Nook has got kind of this cute little retro diner look to it. And it's mostly open on mornings and afternoons and weekends. And then Susie's is open, I believe, 7 days a week, and they're open morning, afternoon, evening. They have a wonderful buffet there. Buffet bar type salad soup service for their meals. Now, if you continue branching out a little bit more and you go maybe a little bit north on Pacific or out to Country Club, you have UJ's and you have Pater's. And you have the DeVega Brothers, which is in Stone Creek Village, and DeVega Brothers is right near where the fountain is and where they have the summer concert series. And there's a couple others out there I'm not mentioning because they're chains. Nothing against them, but I'm trying to talk about local, independently owned, operated Stockton businesses. But the Stone Creek Village does have some really great chain places for those who want to go to a chain. And then, of course, all over town, take your pick. You've got a Casa Flores, or 6 Casa Flores in Stockton.
You mentioned Tio Pepe's, but they also have one in Lincoln Center also.
That's right. Tio Pepe. You're exactly right. Thank you for reminding me of that. You have the Tio Pepe's downtown and the Tio Pepe's in Lincoln Center. So let's see if I left anything out. Okay, and if you go to Country Club, you've got Michael's Pizza. If you go to El Dorado, you've got Eric's Pizza. Let's see. On Pershing, you have Pomodoros Pizza. There used to be a place called Pomodoros. I don't know if it's still called that. You've also got the annex or the takeout portion of Dave Wong's. And, of course, on East March Lane, you have Dave Wong's, which is a legendary Chinese restaurant.
I don't know if I'm sure they have the takeout part on by Pershing anymore.
Maybe they don't, but they did.
But they do still have
years.
the takeout one on March Lane.
Okay.
Also.
And there was the breadfruit tree with reggae music. I forgot the kind of food exactly to explain. Haitian food, I believe it was. I'm not sure what their current status is. And then I was about to name another one that I was thinking of, but it popped out of my head. Well, you've got Angelina's out on East Fremont. And they have a great slogan because they're an Italian restaurant. They call themselves Possibly the Best.
East Fremont, Wilson Way area. Yeah.
Yes, and it's excellent. Yeah, it's right where our old RTD Transit Center bus garage used to be.
Now that's a nice little shopping complex now, actually.
Yeah, Eastern Plaza's actually got quite a few places.
Yeah, but the one across the street, yeah.
Now you've got
the old RTD, yeah.
Right, where RTD used to be, you've got a beautiful Walgreens, and you've got a couple chain-type restaurants I'm not going to mention, but they're there, and they're nice, they're good.
And the shoe place now, actually, too.
Yes, that's right. Oh, yeah, that's right. They built the shoe place. And shoe stores of any kind now are becoming rare. Even the big chains now are struggling a little bit.
Yeah, more people are buying online.
Yeah, they're buying online, and they just buy at the big department store. They just go in and, everybody tries on their own shoes and buys them now. The days of going in and being fitted for shoes are almost obsolete.
Were you also a shoe salesman, Nate?
No, but I can't. But I'm a just huge supporter of independent businesses, and I like certain old-fashioned ways of doing things. I will mention, and we don't try to favor one business over another here. And I know there's certain rules of us being non-commercial that we can't actively promote businesses and prices. I know that too. Occasionally, prices will pop out as a rule of thumb, but we're not making a commercial. But there is an old-fashioned shoe store left called the Shoe Palace. The Shoe Source. And that's in Stone Creek Village. And they used to have a location here on the Miracle Mile. And I did buy some shoes there. So anyway, we just want to point out that Stockton is not lacking for a lot of places. And there's many more independent pizza places, too. That's the only two I could happen to think of right now that are non-chain pizza places. We've got another place. I don't know if you'd say it's big enough for a party, but on the Miracle, there's also the legendary Sam's Cafe.
Yeah.
Just a few blocks up from here.
Then Thornton Road, there's a couple pizza places.
Right.
Dante's.
Yeah, if you go out on Thornton Road, there's several places I haven't
Yeah.
thought to mention because I haven't been out that way in a long time and I can't really remember the names of them.
Yeah.
And then there was an Italian, a fairly long time traditional Italian restaurant out on West Country Club near, I want to say near Telegraph, but I cannot remember the name of it. I'm hoping he might be able to find it on the computer. We just want to point out, though, this city has a lot of great places to eat. They're wonderful places. They have great food. It's fresh. They'll tailor the event to your liking. There's just no reason that you have to leave Stockton to get a good meal. And many of these places do have outdoor or terrace seating and eating. And again, we didn't name all of them. I named as many as I could think of. I was trying to target downtown Stockton and the Miracle Mile primarily, as well as Country Club and Harding, because I'm still trying to promote. While the Stockton Alive is about all of Stockton and San Joaquin County and the Great Central Valley and Northern California and our entire region, it is one of my great determinations in life that we're going to bring people back to downtown Stockton, because Stockton as a whole city cannot be thought of favorably until people like the downtown. You can have all the great chain restaurants you want on March Lane, Benjamin Holt, Hammer, and North Stockton or wherever, in South Stockton too. But you simply will not have this city thought of really well until it's downtown. Makes a stirring, full-fledged comeback, which it is doing right now. But it's not quite there yet totally. You still have to convince people to go to downtown, even though it's perfectly safe downtown. I work there every day. I walk down the streets all day long. When I drive and don't ride the bus, I park my cars there all the time. Have no problem whatsoever in downtown. The only thing about downtown that does happen occasionally is you get one or two goofy people screaming. But I've seen that in the parking lots on Hammer Lane too.
Yep.
It's just more noticed downtown.
You see it a lot of places.
Right.
Yeah.
And you see a lot of panhandling downtown. But again, it's not really different from anywhere else. It's just more noticeable.
Everybody likes to pick on downtown.
Right. Downtown doesn't have as much foot traffic, so these people stand out a little bit more.
But if you go to any downtown in America,
Yeah, you
you'll
go to
see
any
the same
downtown.
thing.
And you go to a lot of strip malls in America, and that's the way it is too. I mean, you just cannot shake people's opinion about the safety of downtown Stockton. They just will not buy into it. If they've been here a while. You bring new people here, they think downtown's great. They think, oh, this is the most beautiful retro-looking thing with the brick facades and the Romanesque revival-type architecture.
And you see the medical dental building still up. Yeah.
Yes, all these things. And the outside people aren't scared of downtown. They think it's great. They just think it's time to rebuild it. And actually, we are on the verge of a huge wave of investment in downtown from everything that I've heard, but I can't say too much about it today. One place I left out from the Cineplex is the Thai Palace, by the way. And there's also Mumu's, the retro.
Musaki's.
I mentioned Misaki.
Okay, sorry.
We can mention him again. Wonderful Japanese restaurant. And then there's also Mumu's with the retro diners, drive-in hamburger, French fries.
Also on the Miracle Mile, Kokoro.
Yes, thank you. Kokoro is very, very successful Japanese restaurant.
It's always
They're
packed
packed
every
all
night.
the time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
every night you go there.
And then as far as a little place that has great food, you got the little sandwich shop right a block from here. It was on the tip of my tongue. House of Shaw.
Oh yeah, right over here.
So I mean,
But,
there's just all kinds of places to eat. And I know we probably missed half of them we could have named. I don't know if I mentioned the Graduate on Country Club. I can mention the Graduate also.
if people don't know about House of Shaw though, it's strictly cash, so you have to bring cash. with
Well,
you.
yeah, there's still a place for that.
Which is interesting. It's kind of retro, yeah.
That's certainly retro. This seems amazing now. One reason we're not going to delve into sports here, but I will mention one thing about attendance at sporting events.
Yeah.
And now, if you don't sell out a stadium, or let's say you have 25,000 on a Tuesday night game in a major league ballpark, that's considered like mediocre average attendance. When I was growing up, a typical Wednesday night game at a baseball park was 7,000 or 8,000. I could show you box scores where Dodger Stadium had 11,000 and 12,000.
And now more people are making.
Well, and here's why. Because until the mid-1980s, you couldn't charge a ticket on a credit card. You couldn't buy it online. You couldn't. Yeah, if you wanted to get a ticket in advance, you'd have to go to an authorized sport ticket agency, there was one or two of those per every city. Mm-hmm. And you couldn't get cash on a weekend from an ATM machine.
Nope.
One time I started to drive to a Giants game from Chico, and about Dixon, I realized I don't have enough money. Mm-hmm. If I go to this game and I buy gas to come home, and I pay for and parking was like $1.50 then, compared to today's $25. But if I pay for parking and
Or
my
even
reserve
more.
seat ticket, I either have to pay for gas or I have to have concessions. I can't do both. I thought, there's no way I can survive 6 hours without eating, and I can't drive home without gas. So I reluctantly turned home. I turned around and went back to Chico.
Do you remember who they were playing that night?
I do remember. They were playing the Cincinnati Reds, and it was Willie McCovey Day on a Sunday.
Was this Big Red Machine era? Or
they were still good, but it was not.
Joe Morgan on the team?
No, yeah. The big names were. Oh, yeah. 1977, they still had all the big names. In fact, that was the last year I think that Pete Rose and Tony Perez were both there. And Johnny Bench, all that. Yeah. And in fact, Pete Rose. So anyway.
He became a Philly after that, right?
By the way, McCovey had a pinch hit in the bottom of the ninth to win the game. And it was 27,000. Now, for the 1977 Giants, 27,000 was a huge crowd.
What night was this? You remember?
It was a Sunday afternoon.
Nice.
Yeah, it was a Sunday. They had promoted this.
Did you listen to the game on the radio?
What's that?
Listen to the game on the radio?
I listened. I went back to Chico, my house on 8th Street.
Who was on the call back then? Was it Lon Simmons?
77 was Lon Simmons and Joe Angel.
Joe Angel's still doing it.
I know you're not a big fan of Joe Angel.
It's a unique style.
Well, he had an interesting voice. He was a native San Franciscan, by the way, but he was a Hispanic native San Franciscan, and he has a Hispanic sound to his voice.
It's kind of interesting how him and John Miller traded places, but they were also on the same broadcasting team for a while. Then
weren't they with the Orioles at the same time?
Maybe, but then Joe Angel came back to the West Coast for like 2 years, then went back.
Well, he did the Giants. He was a guest announcer in '76, and he did the Giants in '77 and '78 with Lon Simmons, and then they switched from KSFO to KMBR. And then they went to Lindsey Nelson, Hank Greenwald, and I think David Glass. And we won't go anymore because we promised not to go into sports and broadcasting all that much today. So, now, another big event that occurred last Saturday in addition to the I'm sorry. I was speaking of this past Saturday that just occurred, which was August 18th, about my wife's birthday.
Man, this
going back to August 13th, or August 11th, I should say. And I think we talked about it a little bit last week, but the stock market was a very wildly successful event.
Saw you there.
And I was there. Oh, yeah, that's right. We were there. The only thing is, unfortunately, it was still about 100 degrees that day.
You were wearing your RTD...
I wearing my RTD Hawaiian shirt. Yes,
which is pretty nice.
I'll have to wear that on the air sometime.
Nate's always in a suit.
Yeah, I'm always in a suit. Literally, I am.
He's the only broadcaster on KXVS. A couple actually have suits. But
well, I come here straight from work, and that's a challenge. One reason we're not live more often is because I get stuck at work all the time.
It's like you're on MSNBC or CNN or something.
Right. Speaking of which,
fake news?
Our 2 live shows in a row for the first time since I can remember.
Yeah.
And we'll go as live as often as we can. I would do it live every week if I could.
Nate's on assignment all the time.
But anyway, I'm in a suit all the time. That's true, because at RTD, I actually have the right to wear casual clothes on a Friday.
Really?
Yes, but RTD has a board meeting on one Friday of the month. I go to the San Joaquin Regional Rail Commission meetings on another Friday of the month. And inevitably, one of the other 2 or 3 Fridays in a month, I always wind up having some public event, public hearing, workshop, or something.
What is the Rail Commission, real quick? Can you mention that?
The San Joaquin Regional Rail Commission is the ownership, the managing...
Partners, basically, kind of
Well, they're the managing political group that owns and operates the ACE Rail, the Altamont Corridor Express trains that go to Stockton, Tracy, Livermore, Pleasanton, and on to Santa Clara and San Jose. With the big stop, their big stop, of course, really at Great America, where about half the train gets off and gets connecting buses to all of the great colleges and factories of the Silicon Valley. So that's what their primary thing is.
I forgot about Great America.
And actually, the ACE service, as you know it today, going over the Altamont, operates on the former Western Pacific Railroad tracks that were once home to the legendary original version of the Western Pacific California Zephyr train, which now there's a train called the California Zephyr on Amtrak. The difference is Amtrak operates through the historic Sierra Nevada crossing. The Western Pacific version that came through the Altamont used to operate through the Feather River Canyon in Oroville and Portola. And that's a great trip. And I actually have gotten to ride the Amtrak California Zephyr through the Feather River Canyon when they had to detour one time.
I'm making a pitch, Nate, not PBS. Bring back that Huell Hauser show that I used to have. So Nate,
golly, that's just wonderful.
Yeah.
Can you believe this is here in Stockton? I'm Huell Hauser, and I'm just so excited to be here today.
That was a great show, actually.
Oh, it was a great show. I love the guy.
History and stuff, yeah.
It's a shame. For anyone who doesn't know, he passed away about 6 years ago at about age 72. Now, unfortunately, and I want to be very serious about this, because I was waiting for the right moment to bring this in and not confuse it with all the other things we've been talking about, which is parties and celebrations and events. But we did, unfortunately, in Stockton, lose a really great local person in a shocking fashion last week. And I don't know if I'm getting the last name exactly right, my pronunciation, but Dawn Mabalan, great Filipina activist. She was only 46. She went to the University of Pacific, I believe, and she had gotten, I want to say, a master's degree, maybe a doctorate, but I know master's degree. And she is great Filipina, and she died on the eve of the Filipino festival that was held 2 weeks ago at the Filipino Plaza. She was actually vacationing and scuba diving when she was overcome, taken to the hospital, I guess died of a heart attack. I never exactly saw if they claimed a specific cause of death, except that we know that she kind of like fainted, passed out, and then never regained consciousness in the hospital. But she wrote 2 books about Stockton. One apparently just went to the printers the day before she passed away. And the other one is a great story about the our famous former Little Manila. And she is, along with another person who's, I think it's Dylan Delvo, who I believe is broadcast here at some, I don't know, maybe not as a broadcaster. I know he's been a guest here at KXVS, the Voice of Stockton. She, if I hope I'm getting this right, she and Delvin Dello Dylan Delvo created the Little Manila Foundation and created the historic markers and references that exist on Lafayette Street in downtown Stockton. Most of our historic Little Manila was torn down for the Crosstown Freeway, or obliterated or bulldozed away, I guess. We also lost Japantown, and we lost what was a good part of what was once Stockton's Chinatown. So we lost 3 different ethnicity, cultural centers of Stockton when the Crosstown Freeway was built. Now, when I say built, they cleared the land in 69 and 70, and then they constructed it as far as Stanislaus Street, where it came to a dead stop in 1971.
Do you remember when it was being built?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I remember going to some of the shops before it was built. I grew up in French Camp, as we've mentioned a handful of times on this show. When I grew up in French Camp, which is the very, very, very early 60s, and I was a little kid at that time. I mean, we're talking 3, 4, 5 years old now. There was a lot of Japanese people that lived in French Camp at that time, and one of the people was called the Hayashinos, and they had a little grocery store called the Star Market. And this apparently was in the area that later got bulldozed for the freeway. And I remember going to the Star Market. Now, the other memory I have, which I used to misplace with San Francisco, I now know it was Stockton. Was I remember as a little kid, at this point, I'm 4 or 5 years old. I think we still lived in French Camp. We then moved to Manteca, by the way, which was 8,000 people when I moved there. August of 1962. But we went to this restaurant. I remember we went to this restaurant. We entered a kind of a little nondescript wooden front door, walked up a long flight of narrow wooden stairs, and lo and behold, there's this beautiful Chinese restaurant at the top of the stairs. And I remember, and I was, I can count on one hand how many times I ate out in a restaurant until I was about the age of 9 or 10. That was a huge, huge event for me. We always ate at home. My mom always home baked. Everything was baked and cooked from scratch, which is a great thing, which I now appreciate. Didn't know that much about it then as a kid. But going out to a restaurant, having people serve you at a table was just this huge novelty thing. And of course, Chinese restaurants always have the bright decorations and all the fancy paneled ceilings and paintings and mirrors and all that kind of stuff. So we got this long, narrow, rickety stairway, and at the top there's this incredible Chinese restaurant that looks like a garden that bloomed. And all these years I had thought it was San Francisco. Talking about the original On Lock Sam that was on Washington Street. That also, I say on Washington. It was on Washington, but it got obliterated. It was on the south side of Washington Street, apparently, I think. And it got obliterated for the Crosstown Freeway. So I have some personal memories, just tiny dim ones, of that area of town before it succumbed to the urban renewal of the late 1960s, early 70s. I don't remember the area of downtown West Stockton. when Main Street used to go all the way through, and before they built the what was then known as the Woodruff Center. Now it's the I forgot now that the Weber Institute of Technology High School, which is nearly across the street from the Waterfront Warehouse. I know as a kid we probably went over that area now and then, which used to be very industrial, by the way. Up until the late 70s, that was an industrial area. There were still working businesses there, paint factories and construction factories and all kind. There used to be 2 or 3 huge oil tanks. I don't know if you ever saw these, Dustin, because they don't really exist anymore. Oil tanks used to rise out of the ground. They used to float and go up and down.
I've seen some.
If they were up, that meant they were full, because natural gas is lighter than air and therefore lifted. So as the tanks were sinking, that means they were going lower with fuel. There used to be 2 or 3 of those huge tanks in what is now the big empty, you notice that empty field that's between the DMV and the Waterfront Warehouse and Children's Museum. That's where those fuel tanks used to be. So I remember when there used to be switch trains and freight trains on like Aurora Street in Stockton, down by Maine and Aurora and streets by Sonora and all that. There used to actually be switch tracks in all those streets and trains going back and forth, with what used to be active industrial warehouses at that time. All that is now moved out to South and East Stockton. For example, Burlington Northern Santa Fe has that huge intermodal yard out on East Mariposa Road and Farmington. I should say Farmington Road. And Union Pacific now, of course, has that huge railroad switch yard out by Roth Road near Lathrop. So I've seen Stockton. I'm just old enough to have seen kind of the last of the old traditional Stockton before all the modern so-called slum clearance and urban renewal and all that happened. But I'm not old enough to have great memories of all of it, just dim memories of some of it. I do remember when the Stockton Hotel closed as a hotel. That was 1961. They auctioned off the furniture. I remember that they auctioned off the furniture. That's kind of the part I remember about it. I was 4 years old at the time. I don't really remember the old courthouse, even though it was still around. In fact, it was around. It was torn down in 1962, I believe.
Hey, Nate, 4 minutes left to go.
Oh, that's good. Well,
Just letting you know.
Come up with another show here. I didn't even delve into the World Almanac, which I brought as my leftover material.
So you want to mention again what
I was
basically
going to show all how Stockton ranks against all these cities demographically, and statistics, and economics.
some of your favorite places in to go in Stockton real quick? A couple.
Now
Before
or
we
in
go?
the old days?
No, like either or. Like,
Okay, well, let me give you a couple memories, and I think we've mentioned this on the show a couple times. But it was, as a resident of French Camp, I'm almost an honorary South Stocktonian. I went to a great barbecue event Saturday at the Kennedy Community Center. Have you ever been out there? Out on 11th and D Street and out by Pock Lane? Well, anyway, there's a community center named after JFK. And I actually, before I worked for RTD, I used to ride the Route 11 bus, which went in front of my house on Acacia Street, all the way to the Kennedy Center. I took my then 2.5-year-old for swimming lessons. So my youngest son learned how to swim at the Kennedy Center. Now I live on Acacia Street. Well, I still live on Acacia Street, but the Victory Park's pool was sold out then for lessons. Now it's not even in operation.
which.
But anyway, so I was going to mention on Center Street. Center El Dorado merges into Center and it becomes El Dorado. There's a restaurant called Fiesta Mexicana. Has a big bucket on the side. What used to be called the Crab Pot. That was once a really high-class seafood restaurant. And then there's a place that's still there that was there then when I was a kid called the Star Restaurant, legendary Chinese restaurant out there. I already mentioned Yon Lock Sam, of course. And that's probably my old memories. Now, what I like today, I think Yao Suyani's great. I think Angelina's is great. I love going to Bella Vista at the Stockton Hotel. For different reason, I love going to the Deliberation Room. They have both good food and I ate a buffet lunch there today. That's where Becky and I always start our happy hour. We always start there and then we go somewhere else. I'm a member of the Village West Yacht Club out across the water from Garlic Brothers at the end of Benjamin Holt. Love to go to DeVega Brothers. Have gone many times to, I'm trying to think. Now I went blank on one of the other restaurants that we've gone to quite. Well, we used to go to the Shadows. We used to have a great time going to the Shadows when it was under a legendary owner named Norman. And it was under the same ownership for about 40 years. And the Shadows is on the upper end of Pacific Avenue, next to what used to be called the Perry's 5 Mile House. Now that's a laundromat. Then there's a Popeye's Chicken or something there, if I remember right, in that area. I don't know if the Shadows at this current time is open or not, but it was once one of the great dance areas. Becky and I used to go dancing at a place called The Back Door, which was the hottest spot in Stockton in the late 80s, early 90s. That's now called The Alibi, I believe. Mm-hmm. And for the younger crowd, they've got some places like, I went blank on it. Name the place on Pacific Avenue all the young people go. There's Valverde's or something, and there's another one.
On where?
Pacific Avenue.
Oh, Pacific.
There's a really hot spot on Pacific Avenue. All the young people go in a strip mall. I just can't think of the name of it.
Oh man, I'm trying to. I forgot.
So anyway.
Yeah.
And then and I've eaten just about every place I mentioned it. I've eaten at some point or another.
Hey, Nate. We should be wrapping up soon now, but hold on before we go.
Yeah.
I wanted to mention something this weekend. Some events, as Nate talks about. People say there's nothing to do in Stockton.
Right.
Well, that's actually false a lot of the time.
Right.
So.
Oh yes.
Come out October 25th, Saturday, from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. for the function, which is a great event. A new event KXV is helping out with. It's for a positive monthly gathering for youths and families, and it's open to the public. So come out to 1850 Pacific Avenue, Stockton, California. So if you know where that, if anybody on the Miracle Mile, if you drive by on a Friday night, you hear the drum circle going on. It's right there at the old AT&T building. Right there on Pacific Ave. So you'll see it. RTD goes by there all the time.
Yep, Route 40 Express.
Right by the stoplight.
7 days a week.
And then later on that evening, if you want a fun of it, from 6 to 10 p.m. the Bedford Block Party. So we will be having special guests. DJ will be playing, Leo the Line. Brandon James will be there for the 9 o'clock hour.
Back from his wedding.
Yep, we'll have a great Stockton song from him, as always. And much more musical acts, and plus beer, wine, food. Come on out. It's another great family event.
And last week was also Lincoln Live again at Lincoln Center. Now,
great car show out there.
And Betty has a big event coming up September 9th, I believe. So we'll make sure next show we highlight that.
Yeah, the 4th annual community, or it's right actually behind Nate. I'm trying to read it. Chicano Community Program Radio Reunion and Car Show
right here.
At Oak Park. You know where Oak Park is, North Stockton. Come on out. We got great.
This is Betty's event coming up.
Yeah, great guest. Juan Escovedo will be there. So
wow,
much more. And Nate, it's always been fun.
Stockton is alive, and the Bedford Block Party is going to be a recurring event. That's ongoing.
Yep, and the function
last Saturday of every month.
Both of them. The last Saturday of every month.
Yeah.
So before we go, Nate, anything you want to say, real quick, from your point of view?
Well, RTD won a national award. We'll talk about that a little bit in the next show.
Yeah?
I didn't want to crowd it into all this other stuff.
Do you get a prize, though?
Yeah.
You get another cool shirt.
Yeah,
well, it's been Stockton Alive with the one and only Nate Knott. I'm Dustin Breakbill. For more information on The Voice of Stockton, go to thevoiceofstockton.org. And from all of us on the Miracle Mile at KXVS,
for Stockton.
goodbye. Till next time.